America has a problem. They are drug addicts and they're addicted to these things called quantitative easing and quantitative tightening. Welcome to the Dynamis Studios this week, guys. We're going to do something way outside the box, but in line with what we bring to you. We're going to talk about business acquisition and why we should be paying attention to business acquisition over the next at least decade. What advantages there are, why we should be looking this way, especially in comparison to real estate acquisition and a potentially bumpy financial road ahead over the next decade. I have brought in a new friend and fellow GoBundance member, James Richardson, also known on social media as the Biz Buying Brit, to give us the lowdown of everything we need to know and where we need to be looking that we probably aren't already paying attention to. James, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, very excited to be here today and talk to you about something I'm very excited about.
Right off the bat, before we get into your bio, let's just set the stage. Why is business acquisition so exciting right now, and why is it something that we should be paying attention to?
Business acquisition, small business acquisition specifically, is part of the greatest wealth transfer in history that is going on right now. So you can Google it. There are various articles that exist out there, and the general kind of consensus is that there's at least $10 trillion transferring from the baby boomer generation to the next generation right now. And a large component of that are small businesses. So it's thought that about 19% of baby boomers own small businesses. And a lot of them are typically under the threshold that private equity is typically interested in. And so what that does, it creates a huge opportunity for people like you and me to go and buy businesses from retiring sellers, provide a legacy to them to keep their business going. You can do a leverage buyout. It's a bit like how you buy a house. You put the mortgage on the house, so you put the acquisition debt on the business, and then you have the asset of the new business. And if you're coming in with new energy and focus, often there's so many levers available for growth. So it's a huge wealth building opportunity. Right now, cap rates are incredibly compressed, as you know, in the real estate market. So I think this is a very hot area. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I've been doing it full time for a year. And I can't believe it's only been a year, but it's been a wild ride and the best year so far.
So the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the United States that you're talking about, this is what people commonly refer to as the gray wave, right?
The silver tsunami.
Oh, the silver tsunami. That's right. Essentially, that all of these baby boomers that built businesses, have legacies to pass down, are retiring, and you're way more educated on this than I am, but it seems that a lot of their heirs, children, either A, have no experience in running the business, or B, have no interest in running the business. And so the options become they shut the business down. So all of these profitable businesses with mature books of business, clients, established systems that could probably be optimized are either just shut down or sold at a value that's probably way undervalued because they don't really understand what they're doing. They're essentially handing these over to somebody else. I'm sure that there's an advantage to leaving this baby, this legacy that they built, onto the next generation to steward it and take care of it and grow it.
Even just at least two of the businesses we bought in the last year, that was probably what was going to happen. The business would have eventually closed down because there was no suitable, suitor out there, potential acquirer. It's funny, like maybe at our age in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you are thinking about money maybe as a higher motivator. But when you get to that age, actually legacy is so important to people selling a business because they care about their employees. They have deep relationships with the people that work with them, supported them on their journey. And so we found that that's actually first and foremost is like, hey, you're going to look after my customers and my employees. Provide me a nice retirement as well, that's great. But you know what? I've probably done all right for myself already, so it's not the primary motivator.
This is not just transaction. Small business is community oriented. It's family oriented. These things are their children that they grew and loved and struggled with and developed. As you get older, you become more socially conscious, right? And they want to know that the decisions that they are making have a positive impact in the communities that they serve.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, this is, their lives. It's one of the companies we bought have been running for over 4 decades. That's actually longer than I've been alive. I'm in my late 30s, so it's amazing to think about, really. And you meet some wonderful people that, I'm sure there are bad apples out there, but, the sellers that we're meeting are great people that they want that succession planning. And as you kind of alluded to earlier, I don't like full generalizations, but a lot of the younger generation are not interested in running kind of traditionally blue-collar businesses, maybe kind of unglamorous businesses to do with warehouses, manufacturing products, maybe construction, things like that. They want the sexy widget. They want the latest trends and the fads. And there's money to be made in those things, and some of those things are interesting. However, it just creates this huge vacuum of these amazing businesses that are like the backbone of the economy. And these business owners really are the unsung heroes of the economy because they've been plugging along for 20, 30 years, providing jobs, paying taxes, improving communities, and they have no one to sell their business to.
Small business truly is the backbone of America. It's what makes America so special. The ability to come to this country, start a business, scrap together, whatever you have to do to get this business off the ground and running and have your family running it. Main Street America, blue collar, these service-oriented businesses, that is woven into the fabric of what makes America such an amazing place. And we have an obligation to steward that. America provides this opportunity for the next generation to pick up the stone and carry it even further. So tell us, how did you get into this? Give us a background of your story.
Just to rewind a second, I'm an immigrant to this country. So what you're saying is true. And this is what makes one of the many things that makes America awesome. I'm not saying there's no opportunity if you listen to this outside of the United States, but being from Europe and then being here, I love the pro-entrepreneur culture that exists here. I think it should be protected. And I think as someone who wasn't brought up here, there's so much opportunity here. So if you are here in America, what an amazing opportunity to work hard and just to create something and build something. I get excited. I love the fact that I'd like to say I'm a proud US immigrant, not yet a citizen, but a permanent resident right now.
I think that's so special. And I like to write down these thoughts, and they become more refined over time. And it usually starts with like an idea bumping around my brain, kind of like a rock kicking around. And right now I have this idea kicking around that immigrants are actually what's going to save America. What I mean is like, if you look at the breakup of America, okay, who's successful right now and who's not? Who's kind of at the mercy of being a victim and bumping off the rails of life is happening to them, and who is really taking charge and maneuvering aggressively ahead to build a legacy for future generations? And I hate to paint with a broad brush, but I look around and I see it's immigrants. Immigrants are coming here and they're looking for opportunity and they're finding it. And conversely, I have friends who were born and raised here, lived here their whole life. All they're doing is complaining, telling me what's wrong with America every single day. They're slipping further into poverty. And you have to ask yourself, like, what is the difference? Really, it's that these immigrant families are coming here, searching for the opportunity and putting forth the effort and their perspective on what's available instead of complaining. Like, they may have just escaped atrocious situations where maybe you don't have the autonomy to start a business or provide your own income or earn whatever you please. It's really astonishing to me how many immigrants can come here and be so successful. And I really think that it's future generations of immigrants coming here that are going to preserve what America truly is.
Well, if I can somehow play a tiny, tiny role in that and evangelize how great this country is, then happy to play a role in that. I think even like tying into your world, the loan world and the real estate world in Europe, where I'm from, 40-year loans are the norm. House prices are so expensive, and you don't have things like the FHA programs that exist, like what you can buy a duplex with 3% down and live in one side and rent out the other side. That's like, that stuff doesn't exist. UK, I'm like, man, I had to somehow like make this happen with my friend when we bought an apartment together and like slept in one bedroom and rented out the other one to like somehow bootstrap this thing together in the UK. So there's so many things that do exist out there. So yeah, you may not see it right now, but it doesn't mean it's not out there.
The opportunity is there if you just pursue it. So you have to stop telling yourself that you're a victim and everything is hard for you and life is just what it is. And you have to shift into a mindset of, hey, glass half full. I'm in gratitude to be in this country that provides me opportunity to go pursue a life that I believe I deserve and to go do it.
There's an amazing proverb, which is like the power of life and death is in the tongue. Like you said, how you think, and then it's also watching the words that you say.
Absolutely. So tell us about your journey. How did you get here? How did you get your start? And then how did we transition into business acquisition?
I always knew that I wanted to try this. I don't know why, I just did. I spent 12 and a half years working in the world of the Big Four accounting consulting firms. Huge organizations, like $40 billion a year, I think, in revenue, that kind of size. So on paper, I had an amazing career, and that's how I ended up in the States. So I was transferred from London to New York. I was meant to be there just 2 years for 2015, 2016 and go home. But I met my wife in New York and never left. Now we live in Nashville and have a family down here. And so in the back of my head was always got this amazing career. And it's something that I'm naturally good at, in that I'm good at numbers and I like business. I always thought it'd be so cool instead of consulting with these businesses to actually buy some. They're probably going to have to be a bit smaller than the ones that the big companies consult with. And quite honestly, I didn't really have the confidence. And you got to do things at the right time for you as well. You got to give yourself grace. As someone who was in the country, I was on a visa. I couldn't have just left and done this. So I had to wait for the right time. Jordan, my wife, and I got married. We decided to have a family, move to this region in the country. And I guess all this time I was working in my W-2, I was just preparing for an eventual exit in a way. I didn't know if I was ever going to have the confidence to do it, but I was still doing the preparation steps. So I was buying rental properties. I started in the UK, bought 2 in the UK, and then all of the rest have been in the States. And by last year, I had between 33 and 35, mostly single family homes. I remember buying my first one and thinking, I'm miles away from financial freedom, but you just chip away at it. Make sure you're going in the right direction. And then one day you'll look back maybe 5 years and be like, wow, I've come a long way. And progress really starts to compound. So in a way, I couldn't believe last year I had 35 rental units, and it was bringing in a really decent amount of money. Some of them were short-term rentals, and then we'd actually done some new construction, which we did build to keep. So build and then refi and put a tenant in. They cash flow really well because there's so much equity in them. Got to a point where I knew that we could take a good amount of money out of the rental portfolio. It basically provided a base. And then in my group, in my W-2 job, I was at this point where I was next in line for the partnership. It was kind of like a now or never moment for me. I knew that if I wanted to go for partner, I had to knuckle down, work really hard. With it comes long hours, stress. And, I worked with some fantastic people and they're great at their job. I just knew it wasn't for me. And so I kind of revisited this old dream, buy businesses. And I just thought, other people have done this. I can figure out how to do it. And I put a lot of this down to my faith and God as well, because I'd been exploring it a little bit in the background, never really worked out, explored again. And then as 2022 rolled around, I started to get a deeper relationship with one of my private money lenders in the real estate world. So I was doing some Burr projects and I had a private money lender. And as we got closer, I said, hey, I don't actually want to buy real estate anymore. I want to buy businesses. And he was like, interesting. And I didn't know he'd sold out of a great income. So he had actually had amazing operational experience growing small businesses. And so we thought, let's do this together. And by this point, we'd done some projects together. I trusted his character 100% and he trusted mine 100%, which is such an important step for a good partnership. And we just took the plunge. In April of last year, we bought a retaining wall company. It came with a trucking business, which I rolled together into one company. And then since then, we bought a roofing company and a paver manufacturing business. So we've actually bought 4 companies in the last 11 months. And it's been a wild ride. I always say it's 90% exhilarating doing this, but 10% pure terror. Because if you're used to the golden handcuff W-2 situation, you're used to a very good paycheck coming in every month. And then you go to this world where you might have a killer month and then nothing for 2 months. And it's just this whole new world. I was kind of in it as a consultant before, but I feel it differently now. I'm loving every moment. And I know I'm just at the start of my journey.
That's incredible. And what you said about a partnership, finding somebody to really make this dream a reality is such an important piece of the puzzle. Tell me how these companies are performing now in comparison to what we're finding in the real estate world right now. There's no secret that prices are increased. We're starting to see some price pullback, but interest rates are high. We have high rates of inflation. The debt market's a little uncertain and volatile. So what are the performances looking like on these business acquisitions in comparison to chipping away at a real estate portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, you might tell me this is bad or good, I'm not sure. But in the real estate world, when I was buying my last few rentals, I was trying really hard to engineer a 20% cash on cash, whether that's through short-term rental. I know if you do a BRRRR, you can actually get infinite cash on cash because the goal is you take more out than you put in. But if you're just talking like broad brush, the ROIs in business acquisition is so much greater. You can get 100% cash on cash or return on invested capital. You really can. I don't consider anything where I can't get a 50% return on invested capital. And then obviously once you've got the deal, you try and pull as many levers as you can to maximize that return. But I think one of the amazing things is you kind of factor in a base case where it's still way greater than I was getting in real estate, but then you have so much upside because in a business, you have so many levers you can pull. One of the things I really like to buy is companies without a website. I would say that, the majority of the companies we've acquired didn't really have a website, or it had a website that was buried that I couldn't even find as a potential acquirer. So essentially no website. And so if you stack up these levers where they're an amazing base case, but then turbocharged marketing efforts, for example, you can see a huge return on invested capital in a single year.
Yeah, I follow this social media profile. And in fact, I even attended one of her conferences, and she specializes in business acquisition. And what she always talks about is go find what I call a toilet paper business. What she would say is like a necessary business, something like HVAC or a plumbing company, a roofing company, where even in recessionary times, like you can't just have water pouring into the living room. Like you need to get your roof fixed. You need to get your heater fixed. I call them toilet paper businesses, right? Like in the pandemic, everybody still needed toilet paper, and it's not, glamorous or sexy, but at the end of the day, people have business to do and they need to service that business that they do, and it provides income. And so what she really does is target these toilet paper businesses, and she looks for businesses that have been around, that are established, have mature books of business, a seasoned client list, and who maybe have a fax machine in the lobby, who maybe don't have a website, because you could instantly just juice equity out of that company by bringing them into the modern era, bringing up modern systems and technology and streamlining to increase profitability and cut costs and really not change the service at all, just bring them into the modern era and increase the value right out the gate.
That's so true. And yes, that is exactly what we try and do. There's a balance here. So yes, you want the company with the levers, like, hey, it's got a fax machine here. It's a great opportunity to upgrade here. You've also got to balance that with the fact that people don't like change. And when you buy a piece of real estate, it's a thing, it's a hard asset. Whereas company is like a living, breathing organism almost, full of unique personalities. And you don't want to come in and blow things up. So there's this rule, like we try not to really change too much at all for the first 3 months. And it's not that on month 4 we blow things up, but it's just so important to establish a baseline, establish a relationship. And then you start to only bring in changes that incrementally, that basically are beneficial to everyone, or that there's a clear upside. You're not just changing things for the sake of things, because people are so resistant to change, and it makes sense. I think it's wired into some of our DNA, But you're right. We also go for long-established businesses. Like, I really don't like businesses that have been around for less than a decade. It hasn't been that hard to find businesses that have been around for 20 years plus. That means you've been through a couple of bad patches in the economy. You can see how people fare, what management was like, what happened to the customer base, cost base, everything. We did roofing for a similar reason, as you said. It's always going to rain, and so there are always going to be leaks that spring up in houses, businesses, multifamily properties. Like you said earlier, these businesses are the backbone of the economy, and there's so many out there. A lot of your audience, as you said, are in the real estate space. It's actually quite similar in a way to analyzing a rental property, analyzing a business. It's just off-putting to a lot of people because they get scared by financial statements, because it's a little bit different. The principles are the same. You still have to think commercially. You just have to understand what you're looking at. And so I always say it's doable for anyone, but you really have to learn how to read the 3 financial statements, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. Most small businesses don't have a cash flow statement, from my experience, which is a shame. If they have one, that's a great thing. But you have to know the P&L, but you can't just learn the P&L. Balance sheet is incredibly important to look at how healthy it is. The different types of asset, the ratios between.
Sounds like you need to write a book about buying a business.
Yes, I have a website, businessbuyingbrit.com, and on there is a free EBOOK, which has the first 4 things on there that I look at when I look at a potential business acquisition. And they're in more detail in the book, but I can run through them quickly. The first one is financial statements, as I kind of alluded to there. What do you need to look at in the financial statements? The second one is EBITDA. That's a term people throw around on the internet, but it's really important. It's basically taking the bottom line profit, adding back non-cash items and other things you want to extract to get to a core profitability, otherwise known as EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And it talks a little bit about why that's important. There's 2 other things that I always look at. You look at the sector. I would never buy into a business where I'm completely unfamiliar with the industry or sector of the business. If I'm unfamiliar, then my partner has to be really good at it, or someone on my team, investing team, has to be really good at it. Otherwise, it's not worth the risk. I think you've seen that a bit in the crypto world. People investing in maybe coins or things they didn't understand, and then it all crashed. And so I just try and be wary of that. And then the other thing is just the structure of the business. So I always think a structure is an A and a B. I think about the capital structure on the way into a business acquisition. You really need to look at how you're actually going to acquire a business. That is incredibly scary to a lot of people. You can actually buy things creatively. We bought a business 100% financed before, so it is possible to do. So you just need to look at your capital structure, and then also you need to look at the actual structure of the organization once you bought it. Because often, if you go to these online business brokers, a lot of the things on there, if you bought them, you'd be buying yourself a job. And you don't want to leave the situation you're in and buy a job, which is probably as stressful, if not way more stressful, because you bought yourself a job and you've got the acquisition debt that you're trying to pay down on. So it runs through more detail on the free ebook on my website, businessbuyingbrit.com. But I welcome input from yourself or any of your listeners. I think I need to put together like a broader curriculum for if you have never looked at a balance sheet before, what questions should I be asking the seller? There's so many facets here. They're all simple. But like if you haven't done it before, it can be completely overwhelming, and it's sad because it means you're missing out on this amazing opportunity.
Are there any types of businesses that you shy away from? You know, you see a business and you're like, oh yeah, that's not in our scope. It's going to be hard to make a profit here. There's too much going on.
Yeah, it conceptually has to make sense. I would say I don't really like SaaS businesses or anything too tech heavy. Really, one of the primary reasons for that is they're very expensive. Like these smaller, more traditionally blue-collar businesses, you can buy at 3 times earnings. And that's incredibly important to me, to buy in at a really favorable multiple of earnings. If I don't want to pay 20 times revenue for a tech company, I want to pay 3 times earnings for a business that I can really get my hands into and provide value to. There are some other industries that I probably would shy away from. I don't know how I feel about restaurants. Like I probably wouldn't do restaurants. Unless it was just like a passion project. What I like is the entry multiple you can get in at some of these traditional toilet paper businesses.
Yeah, probably businesses that have a lot of inventory on hand. Somebody that's like flipping a lot of inventory every month, like a convenience store. Those probably aren't as advantageous. I'm just thinking like from a perspective of increasing value and operation. It's a lot of inventory that you're tracking, and then you got to purchase the inventory, and hopefully the value of that inventory is worth what you paid for it over time. So simple, scalable toilet paper industry, HVAC, plumbing, roofing, things that we all need, and businesses that are old, maybe not old, but need some updating and are at risk of being killed by a lack of a generational legacy.
By the way, you're right on the inventory point. I've looked at some balance sheets of some inventory heavy companies, and unless you really know the industry, you're obviously paying something for that inventory you're buying if you don't know if it's obsolete or almost obsolete. And so really, it's a risk. It's an additional risk. And yeah, if you know the industry, you could do very well in it. But for a lot of people, you probably want to stick to service businesses.
And just like you were saying, like you're buying yourself a job, when you're looking at these businesses, you want to make sure that what you're purchasing for and then what your debt service is going to be, whatever those terms are, there's enough room to hire an expert probably in this business. Otherwise, you're the operator day to day. And just like you were saying, you're right back in that same situation. So you want to make sure that the business is profitable enough to hire an operator and still produce some return on investment for you as the physical owner. I think that business acquisition is incredibly interesting. Like, I get hyped up talking about business acquisition. In fact, I've read several books on it. There's just so much opportunity. It's so interesting. It's just, I feel like there's a flood of opportunity out there. We work a lot with real estate. So there's a lot of real estate investor personalities on social media and TV, and a lot of them are really successful and they have portfolios with thousands of units. Most of them got rich by owning a business. Most of them had a high income from business ownership that they then diversified into real estate acquisition. I think they go hand in hand. And there's just overwhelming evidence that if you want to make a lot of impact and make a lot of earned income, business ownership is one of the only ways to do it.
Entrepreneurs take on a huge amount of risk. So I think if you do it right, then you can be very handsomely rewarded. But along the way, you take on a lot of risk, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So
yeah, it's scary.
I think your observation is exactly right. Actually, it's part of my story, isn't it? I mean, we're just talking about it. Real estate provided the backbone. Then that first acquisition that I bought provided financial independence for me, financial freedom. So I typically don't have a job anymore. I'm a full-time investor. Now I'm starting to stack up more businesses that are appealing and exciting to me. And at some point, I think I'm going to go back more heavy into real estate investing. But right now, this opportunity is in front of me. And the right time to do this is now.
And that's what makes a successful investor, right? To be successful is you have to understand timing, when to push really hard and when not. We're in the river. There's times where you want to swim with the flow of the river, and there's times to get out of the river because the current's dried up or there's a waterfall come in. That's why you're going to make it. That's why you're going to be successful. That's why you're a winner, because you understand, let's capitalize on the opportunity, and then I will pivot to the new opportunity. I'm not singularly a real estate investor. I'm not singularly business acquisition specialist. I'm flexible, and I'm here to do whatever's necessary, whatever it takes, whatever the opportunity is to leave a legacy for future generations and for this country that you love. This sounds crazy. There could be people out there that have never heard about business acquisition, and they're sitting there thinking okay, this guy's talking about 3 times multiple. What he means is, okay, how much is their profitability? And we apply that to a multiplier. We're going to say 3, and whatever that profitability is times 3, that's how much the business is for sale. So if a business generates $300,000 in revenue a year, holy cow, that's almost $1 million evaluation on this business. James, how the heck do I buy $1 million business? I don't have $1 million.
Typically, there's lots of different ways to value a business, and in the world of small business, it's the wild, wild west. There's no absolute definites. You need to do it this way, but generally, a multiple of earnings. So it's a multiple of EBITDA. So let's say you had EBITDA of 300, and it was an industry where you typically get 3x. So yeah, you pay 900K to purchase the business. It's been wide-ranging so far for me, done it lots of different ways, but I mean, typically you would put something down. We'll come back to that because there are different ways to deal with that. But then one of the really advantageous ways to do it is seller financing, because if you are dealing with an owner who's retiring, they might actually not want all the money up front, because by delaying it, you're actually making it easier on their CPA for tax planning. They probably don't need that money immediately, and they'd rather have that money and not have a lot of it taxed. So if you can find something that works for the seller and for you as a purchaser, you can actually take a large portion of that theoretical 900K as a seller finance note. We're going to come back to the down payment, but one thing I did want to mention is something called an earnout. Earnouts are pretty common. Let's just think about me buying a business. Quite a lot of risk for me. I'm scared maybe that I buy a business and all the customers leave and all the employees leave, and I'm left with a big piece of debt. I got paid out with nothing left. So there are different ways to do an earnout, and some people can be maybe a bit slimy on how they structure it, but I try and be as fair as possible. So the way I do it, I use it as a baseline protection for me. So if I buy a business that does $1 million every year, I say of that 900K, I'm going to withhold 200K. And I'll pay you 100K a year from now if the business doesn't drop below 950 in revenue. and then 100K the year after if it doesn't go over 150. So it's basically just like making sure the business doesn't plummet. It allows the seller to be an advocate for you in the marketplace because they probably have long-standing relationships with the customers. They're still going to get phone calls. They just will. Even if you transfer their number, somehow people will get in contact with them. If they're known in your local area, you need that person to say, hey, I've actually sold on to some great guys. They're running the business great. Here's their new number. Go with them.
You're essentially negotiating insurance on purchasing the business. Like, you don't want to lose your client base. That's a big advantage to seller financing too, is because if the seller's carrying the debt, then they have a vested interest in the success of the company. They're going to be there to answer the phone when you call. You know, if you just pay them out cash and the next day they're in Bora Bora and you call them and say, hey, what the heck's the problem here? We're having an issue in accounting. They're likely inclined to let it go to voicemail. Whereas if their distributions are based on your success and they're carrying the debt, they're probably going to answer the phone.
Exactly. There's a way to work here together. And if you don't have the down payment, there are several things you can do. You can do a deferred down payment. Some people, again, don't need the money immediately. They may want the down payment instead of stretching it over 5, 7, 10 years and a note. They may want it in the next 6 months. And hey, you may have a little bit, but you can cash flow some of it from the business. That's called a deferred down payment. I mean, for most people, I'd probably do a partnership. I always say there's the hierarchy of, like, in the small business acquisition world. People think money is the hardest thing to find, but actually the hardest thing to find is the good deal. Once you got the good deal, you have to find a good operator. Once you got a good operator, guess what? The money is actually quite easy to find. And even if you don't believe that's true, because I used to not believe that, it is true. It's just you got to expand your circles and ask the right people, because there's a lot of people out there that have the funding and they don't want to have active roles and they're looking for ROI all the time. And this is a very attractive space. So, you could be at one conversation away from a very amazing business partnership that could change your life.
Yeah, that's true. Even if without a partnership too, it's just so accessible. Last year, I was in the gym getting the reps in of practicing buying these businesses, and I called on a few. And I was looking for a business that was valued around $1 million. And I just started calling banks that offer SBA loans, and with no history of being in this business and no income, because I just changed careers. They weren't looking at my income. They weren't looking at the credit score. They wanted to know, what did the financials do in the business? And they were willing to give me the $1 million for 10% down, which means I could have acquired this business essentially for putting $100,000 of my own money into the deal, and the bank would have funded the rest of it, which is incredible. And if you're, finding a business that has enough profitability to cover your debt service and pay an operator, you're right. Like, one business acquisition could buy you that financial freedom.
It's so true. I've actually managed to do all of my acquisitions so far without the SBA scheme, because you have a cap of how much you can borrow total with the SBA program. So I've still got that in reserve, and I will probably be using that this year. One thing that's interesting at the moment, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, the rate environment's so high that to make a business cash flow well right now with an SBA loan is more difficult than it was a couple of years ago. But in itself, that's an opportunity, because if you find one that works and it creates enough margin, then if rates do come down, and I want to pick your brains as to whether you think they are anytime soon, you have opportunities for refinance, and then you create even more margin. Like, if you can make it work now, then in the future, you're probably going to be left up with even more free cash flow.
No, 100%. Absolutely. And just to touch on interest rates really quickly, obviously everybody always prefaces with that cheesy saying like, well, nobody's got a crystal ball. We don't know. What I can tell you is like, I just look at data. When I look at the economy and I look at the interest environment and the debt markets, I say, well, what does historical data tell me? And historical data says that every single time we get in trouble, America has a problem. They are drug addicts, and they're addicted to these things called quantitative easing and quantitative tightening. And every time we feel like the market's a little bit out of control, we just turn the levers to manipulate the markets. And so when we get into expensive debt markets and the economy stalls and slows, and we accomplish whatever it is the Federal Reserve wants to accomplish in slowing down inflation, and we achieve a job loss recession, and all of a sudden there's pain in the marketplace, what is America always, every single time done? They print more money. They adjust interest rates to make them cheaper and more affordable, because they're trying to stimulate the economy. And they're doing it by injecting these outside levers. Look, this is not financial advice, but I personally believe that just like every single cycle in the history that we've had of this economy, it goes up and it goes down, and there's really like two tools that they use to manipulate it. And do I think interest rates are going to come down? Yeah, I do. When? I don't know. Probably, I think we could see some like better inflation prints around May this year, but I'm not expecting any long-term adjustments. I think we're going to keep seeing Fed rate increases probably through the end of the year. They came out outright and said a year ago, we want our rate to be sitting at like 5.5%. Well, we still have some hikes to go to get there. If I was going to bet on a timeline, you guys can call me out on this in 2025 when I'm absolutely wrong, but I think we're going to be in a higher interest rate environment at least till 2025. But what's on the other side of that is a whole runway of opportunity of getting the machine churning and upward growth again. And so if you can find an opportunity right now and hold on, get creative, squeeze equity, I think there's a huge upside potential if you can withstand this next year and a half and be stable, batten down the hatches, have dry powder on hand, level up your network, level up your skill set. I fully believe that you could come out of this and springboard into the next wealth category if you are properly prepared.
I totally agree. You said that better than I could. I just think it's weathering the storm in the down points, and it's also not getting carried away.
Yeah.
With the next opportunity. Don't do a marginal deal now.
Right.
Just to squeeze it in, especially not on some sort of variable rate debt.
Oh, yeah. That right there, what you said is key. Like no variable rate financing. Fix debt for as long as freaking humanly possible. Fix your debt. Keep it fixed as long as possible. And get in the habit of saying no. Opportunity is going to come knocking every 15 minutes like you're sitting at the bus stop. Another bus is going to come. Another bus is going to come. So say no. Say no 10 times before you say yes the 11th. There's going to be deal after deal after deal. Define what you're looking for. And if it doesn't fit the criteria, now's not the time to talk yourself into why it could work. Buy for what the value is today, not what you think it is tomorrow. Buy it on long-term fixed debt and get by, batten down the hatches and get by until at least 2025 and then ride that upside up.
My business partner has this saying, and it may not be an original, but he likes to say, a deal of a lifetime comes around once a quarter.
Yeah.
Just don't do marginal deals, basically. It's not worth it.
Be patient, be prudent, do the boring, disciplined thing. The same fundamentals that you've been doing this whole time, stay disciplined to them. It's not sexy. It's not, like you were saying, a tech startup with going to the moon. But you look up 5 years from now and it's life-changing. A decade, 20 years. And I know that, especially as Americans, we want right now, instant gratification. But patience is what's going to see us through this time. And it's going to springboard us into the next wealth category.
It's funny that you look at tech and you're like, you want something that goes to the moon, crypto tech, whatever. And then you think about the boring businesses we're talking about. And let's take a theoretical boring business, like buy one that you think you can double in the next 3 years. So you take it from 1 million to 2 million revenue, or 2 to 4. In that time, you pay off a ton of debt, the acquisition debt. Like that is a crazy amount of money if you take this thing. That is a boring opportunity that some people aren't interested in. That's right in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely, James. You got me fired up. I'm ready to go buy a bunch of businesses with you now. I think you're onto something really cool, and we're definitely going to be following your journey. How can everybody get in touch with you, find you?
Thanks for asking. So businessbuyingbrit.com is my website. There you can get the free ebook with the first 4 steps that you need to consider when looking at a business acquisition. And then I'm building up a Instagram profile. It's at the Biz Buying Brit. I'm most active on there. If you're interested in me, message, give me a follow, and I look forward to connecting with you on that.
Well, thank you, James. And hey, everybody out there in the Dynamis world, I hope that this content is helping you, that you find it helpful, that it's changing your life, that you're learning, that this is just one tool in your toolbox of sharpening your axe to becoming the next undeniable, savagely next best version of yourself. That's what we're here to do. We're here to help you unlock your full potential and reach every aspiration that you have in life and that you are created to achieve. And if you think that this content is helpful, you enjoy this podcast, do me a favor, give us a like, give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends to come listen to the show. Find us on social media. And don't forget, if you're local, if you're up in the Tacoma area and you want to get together and you want to talk about these ideas in person, you want to talk about strategies to acquiring a business, where to find them, how to analyze a real estate deal, you just want to level up your network, reach out to us. Look in the show notes below and sign up for our Pints and Properties meetups, because there is something powerful about being in proximity to other people who are doing things. Come hang out with us at Tacoma Pints and Properties. You could get signed up for our next event. It's free and it's going to change your life. With that, thank you all for listening, and we will catch you all next week.